Welcome to the Point. The race for governor here in Michigan continues to move along. It was Gretchen Whitmer, the Democratic nominee's turn to pick her running mate. That was Garlin Gilchrist. Here's some of how that announcement went in Lansing.
We got a lot of work to do. Today's Michigan families deserve no less than a government that works for them. Garlin Gilchrist is the kind of running mate I was looking for. Smart, dedicated, a true public servant. Someone who knows how to get things done. When you look at some of the worst failures of state government in the last few years, the unemployment insurance agency crisis is one of the most obvious. Thousands of people's lives were ruined because the technology that was supposed to root out fraud screwed up and people were accused of doing something they didn't do a darn thing wrong. Someone like Garlin Gilchrist, with his technical skills, his ability to promote ethics in government, he's the exact kind of partner I need to make this state government work for the people of our state again. And that's why today I am announcing my running mate, and I'm going to introduce you to him right now, Garlin Gilchrist.
Gretchen Whitmer, the next governor of the state of Michigan. Give her a hand. Thank you so much for inviting me to serve alongside you. And I am so excited and thrilled to be here today to begin this journey to help take Michigan in the direction that it needs to go. I want to first thank my lovely wife, Ellen, and my twins, Garlin III and Emily Grace, our family. I also have some other family members here. My parents, my grandparents, my aunts and uncles, they're here to support me, and they've supported me my whole life, and I thank them for that. This election is so important, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm so excited to be on Team Whitmer. I'm a proud native of the city of Detroit. My parents were born and raised in the city of Detroit, and they taught me the values of family, of service, of faith, and of community. My grandmother was a teacher, a middle school social studies teacher for 32 years in Detroit public schools. And she introduced me to the world. But she also changed my life when she made me the first kid on my block to have a computer when I was 5 years old. That set me on a path toward technology and problem solving and learning how to fix things and make systems work. After I graduated high school from Farmington, I went to the University of Michigan to study computer engineering and computer science, learning how to make systems work for people, how to fix things. And that experience led me to make a tough choice. I wanted to be a software engineer, and I, like so many people my age, felt like I had to go to the West Coast to do that. So I did. So I went to Seattle to work as a software engineer at Microsoft. And in that career, I learned how to fix systems. I helped build Microsoft's fastest growing business in its history, SharePoint. But the most important, transformative, and inspiring thing that I got to do was to work on the Obama campaign in 2008. As social media manager for Washington State, I got a chance to use technology to pull new people into the political process. And it's so important to enable people to use everything at their disposal to be able to make sure their voices and values are heard and reflected in a government that responds to them. That was so important to me and so inspiring that after Ellen and I got married, we moved to Washington, D.C., where I was able to be classically trained as a community organizer. But not just an organizer who did the things about knocking on doors and making phone calls, that's important. But also, how can we use the ways that people communicate to build their own political power? I got a chance to work with the Center for Community Change, with MoveOn.org, on campaigns to expand Medicaid under the ACA, on campaigns for economic justice, social justice, racial justice, environmental justice, and fighting poverty. After 5 years in doing that, however, there was something missing. I needed to come home. I missed home. I was gone for 9 years. And that's why after my twins were born and when they were 10 months old, Ellen and I got in our Chevrolet Volt. Yes, we were proud to have a Chevy Volt in Washington, D.C. And we came back home to Detroit. And immediately, I got to work. I got to work working in city government as the first ever director of innovation and emerging technology. My job was to make government work for people, was to restore trust in a broken system. And I got a chance to get to work helping people do things like report potholes and report broken streetlights. Do things like make sure that clogged storm drains get fixed. Make sure fire hydrants actually work. And also make the city government the most transparent, accessible, and accountable that it had ever been by writing the city's open data and transparency policy. That's exactly what we need in state government. We need public servants who are ready to serve and apply all the skills at their disposal to bring Michigan's government into the 21st century. Gretchen Whitmer is the type of leader who's ready to do that, and I am thrilled to serve alongside her because we have so many important things to do. We have to make sure that everyone in Michigan has access to high quality and affordable health care. That means we can't do what our opponent Bill Schuette wants to do. The contrast couldn't be more clear. Gretchen helped expand Medicaid to more than 680,000 people in the state of Michigan. Bill Schuette wants to take health care away from 600,000 people in the state of Michigan. We cannot let that happen. We have so many infrastructure problems and challenges that we need to fix, like these roads, like our water systems, like our schools, making sure they're up to date. I don't want to be concerned that the glass of water I give my son and daughter is going to make them sick. We cannot have dangerous water in a state like Michigan where we have 21% of the world's fresh water. That's inexcusable, and it's time to get to work. I'm ready to roll up my sleeves to work alongside Gretchen Whitmer to build a better Michigan and make this state what we dream about. Make this state that my 4-year-old children won't want to leave to go pursue opportunity because they can get it right here at home. Gretchen, thank you so much for inviting me, and let's get to work.
By the end of the day, we'll know what the tickets will look like in November as both parties are meeting to ratify their lieutenant governor picks, as well as Secretary of State and Attorney General candidates. We'll be talking about all of that next week, and we're back in just a moment. To the Point. Welcome back to the Point. It's a big election year. We've talked a lot about the governor's race. There's a U.S. Senate race. We've talked about the State House and the State Senate. But every member of Congress from Michigan is up for election as well. This week, we sat down and talked with Republican incumbent Fred Upton. We're in the middle of a very busy election cycle. There are a lot of things, initiatives that are being worked on in Washington. I want to try to get to all of that, but let's start with two people who have in the past been close to President Trump. One cuts a plea deal, another gets convicted on 8 counts, 10 other counts, declared a mistrial without retrying the case or going through all of the connection. What does this do to President Trump? What does this do to the atmosphere in Washington?
Well, a couple things. First of all, as it relates to Manafort, his first campaign manager, remember, he was not the campaign manager really through the thick and thin. He was there a year out and then he got fired or left or whatever it was. But it just, I think, is a reminder to all of us. I mean, as I look at a couple of colleagues that have been indicted now this month as well, if you tell the truth the first time, you don't have to worry about it a second. So we want to govern. We want to work to get things done, get the fiscal year finished. This is obviously a pretty big distraction, to say the least, but at the end of the day, does it matter this year? I'm not so sure that it does, so we'll see. Appeals, all those different things, but it goes back to what my dad said. Tell the truth the first time, you don't have to worry about something else coming.
Will this hinder President Trump's ability to govern to the degree that he has had that ability?
I don't think so. Not this term. This term is sort of set in stone. I mean, we know what we have to do, and hopefully the Senate will do opioids. We'll get this off their plate and team up with us at what we've already done in the House, which is bipartisan. We're going to reach the end of the fiscal year, but remember, we got an agreement on budget spending caps in February, passed bipartisan 3-to-1 margin in both the House and the Senate. So that's in essence locked in, baked in the cake. We did both fiscal year 18 and 19, so don't really have to worry about a shutdown between now and then. So it's really, we're sort of moving towards the election, and this is, a pretty big distraction. But as it means in governing this year, no, not really much.
Let's talk about maybe something related. You're working on with 2 bipartisan groups, Break the Gridlock, trying to get Washington to function better, or at least that's when I hear that, that's what I hear. Tell me about that and how you came about that.
Well, I'm in a group called Problem Solvers. We have 4 members from Michigan. It's bipartisan, equal numbers, and we have been terribly frustrated. I mean, the whole country's been frustrated with what they've seen, the dysfunction back in D.C. And so we worked on changing the procedures of the House. We're going to have a new speaker. I don't know if it's going to be Kevin McCarthy, who you know, or Steve Scalise, or Nancy Pelosi, whoever it's going to be. Our group has said, along with No Labels, which is another bipartisan group that's actually bicameral, House and Senate, but we've said in the House, we're tired of this. There are a lot of really good ideas on both sides of the aisle. Goes back to maybe 9th or 10th grade civics. Let's take the best of those ideas. Let's debate them. Let's have votes on them and move on. So whether it's immigration, whether it's environmental spending, whether it's any spending issue, whether it's tax reform, health reform, whatever it is, let's, if it's germane to the bill, let's make sure that we debate those issues and change the rules and insist that whoever that next speaker is, they're going to have to agree to these changes that our bipartisan group is hoping to deliver on. And as you know, I'm a Cubs fan, and I'm an optimist. I'm encouraged by some of the comments by leaders on both sides. We've talked to the leaders. We've sat down with Nancy Pelosi and Kevin McCarthy and others, Steve Scalise. I'm encouraged with their reaction. And if the election breaks, if it's close either way, our group's going to have real sway at really forcing the Congress to act the way that our founding fathers wanted us to do it.
Talk about some issues right here on the ground. I know that recently you have been meeting with people who have the power to look at Line 5 up in the Straits of Mackinac. I know that one of your colleagues, Democrat Gary Peters, Senator, has also been looking at this. I know the entire delegation has looked at this. So this is a pretty bipartisan issue about making sure that the lakes are protected. Where are we, and what do you think will get done there?
Well, here's where I think, first of all, we all of us acknowledge that if there was some break, it would be catastrophic. I've sat down with lots of different officials from the Coast Guard to the head of the Pipeline Safety Administration just this week, who testified up in Traverse City with Senator Peters on Monday. But the bottom line is, this line was laid in 1953. It's time for it to be replaced. There's major it's got propane as well as pretty close as electric, but also oil as well. It needs to be replaced. And for about the last year and a half, I've had almost monthly meetings with Enbridge, who runs the pipeline. The governor's office has been terrific on this as well. And we've said we've got to see some changes because it's not going to last this long. At some point it needs to be replaced. Let's do it now. Let's get on a framework or on a timetable that's going to see it get done. So I think by the end of next month, things will be in place where we can together all announce. It's not a secret that we've been working on this for some time, but really get on a timetable to get this line replaced to make sure that the sanctity of the Great Lakes is how we want it to be. And I feel pretty encouraged that we'll see that happen.
Talking about the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative is something that was taken out of the president's budget initially. It was put back into the president's budget, but
the president's budget actually eliminated it the last 2 years. Thanks to John Molinar, our only voice, Republican or Democrat, on the Appropriations Committee, and based on the vote that we had last year in the Congress, bipartisan member of the Great Lakes Caucus, we were able to prevail and restore all of the money last year, and we succeeded again this year to make sure that there's not a dime of cuts. And it's important. It's important not only for water quality, it's important, as I saw earlier this week, with game conservation, with ducks and turkeys and deer, all the different things over in Allegan County, but also just the fight on Asian carp, the fight on invasive species. If this proposed cut had gone into place, it would have impacted billions of dollars of tourism and trade and economic activity throughout the Great Lakes. It had to change, and thank goodness we had an overwhelmingly bipartisan vote last year, which prevailed then this year, thanks to the work of John Molinar.
One of the questions that has been in my mind ever since I have moved in this area, every 10 years we lose a representative
we're going to lose another
in Congress, and we will lose another one. And where are those members largely going? South and west to some population growth areas that don't have water. So how much of an impact do these kind of things have on some of these places?
They do have an impact. And not only does Michigan lost population, but Pennsylvania, another Great Lakes state, Wisconsin, Illinois, Ohio, New York, these are Great Lakes states. We've all lost population. For us, it was particularly acute because we lost 1 million people in that decade. So not only did we lose those 1 million people, we lost their kids and their kids. And we're still paying the price for that. And as you look at employers, large and small across Michigan, all of them are looking for employees. People aren't here. So we could have those people if they hadn't have left. And so what's happened is they migrated to North Carolina, even Utah. They gained a congressional seat. Here we're going to go down to 13. I can remember when we were at 19.
Let's talk about Upton is running for re-election in his Southeast Michigan district, and he'll be opposed by Dr. Matt Longjohn. When we come back, you'll hear from him. Welcome back to the Point. Every member of the U.S. House is up for re-election every 2 years. We just talked to incumbent Republican Fred Upton from the Southwest Michigan area. He's being challenged this year by Democrat Matt Longjohn. Well, let's start with a little bit about who you are and your background. Obviously, it says you're an MD, but your background is a little different than people might think.
Yeah, I have not had a typical medical career, but as the signs say, I'm Matt Longjohn. I'm a fifth-generation member of this community. My great-great-grandparents walked to Southwest Michigan, and my family tree is a big one. My dad had 47 first cousins here in the district, so I'm from and of the community. My medical career has been something different than most people think of when they talk about a doc or even a doctor running for office. My career has been in public health. I've been a community organizer for health. I've worked on violence prevention. I've worked on children's nutrition programming. I've worked on creating coalitions and nonprofit organizations to help advance people's health from coast to coast. I was the first physician to be at the national offices of the YMCA in its 173-year history. As the national health officer, worked with 2,700 YMCAs across the country to help people live healthier lives. And then got inspired to run for Congress. But it has not been a typical doc-in-the-box, stethoscope-wearing kind of medical career.
Well, let's talk about that inspiration, because you've had all this varied experience. So why at this point take that leap into politics at perhaps one of the more contentious political times in our recent history?
Yeah, the thing that got me into this race was last summer's votes and debate around repeal and replace. I've had the good fortune to work coast to coast, as I said, on health issues with many people. I'm one of a handful of people who've led successful demonstration projects to already expand Medicare. My team at the Y showed that through a community jobs program, we could prevent new cases of diabetes while saving Medicare billions of dollars. And that was only possible through some of the funding that was put aside in the Affordable Care Act to test new ways of cost savings and care improvement. And all of that was put on the chopping block. Even the great results that we had showed, where we had helped to prevent new cases of diabetes by 71%. All of that was being put on the chopping block last May. And then my congressman, our congressman here in the 6th District, Fred Upton, said that he would never support that American Health Care Act that Speaker Ryan had put forward, but then put the Upton Amendment on top of it, and for really a political gesture sold us out, was willing to cut 23 million Americans off of insurance, to waive pre-existing conditions and essential health benefits, and the things that I know that we need in a functioning healthcare system. So I decided to run against Fred to put a different kind of set of ideas forward around healthcare and a number of other areas like campaign finance reform, etc., because I don't think that our Congress has actually been making decisions that help the majority of people.
Well, let's talk about that repeal and replace, which didn't happen.
Correct.
And let's take it a step further back and talk about the ACA that happened with no Republican votes at all. Is it possible, or necessary from your perspective, to find a more consensus way to look at health care? Because the ACA was, again, it was contentious at the time, remains so now. There are ardent supporters, such as yourself, who say it's done a great deal of good for a great number of people. And there are other people that have said that it was a bad idea in the beginning, and they still think it's a bad idea. Yeah. So it's not like there is broad consensus on this.
No, even President Trump now recognizes that healthcare is complicated, right? And I think that you're exactly right. The passage of the Affordable Care Act that was pushed through with only Democratic Party votes, or last summer's attempt to repeal and maybe not even replace the Affordable Care Act, which was largely a partisan move, is getting in the way of people's health and quality of life. I've never been someone who's run for office before, I'm running for office with a background in medicine, in public health, in coalition building, in getting things done by building coalitions around issues that people care about. And I've not been in Congress doing the whims of corporate donors or party leaders. And I think that what you're pointing out as to how the Affordable Care Act was passed or how the American Health Care Act, last summer's Republican plan, was attempted to be passed was purely partisan and is never going to be the right way to get things done in Washington.
Beyond health care, which is admittedly a huge issue, and one that no doubt will be revisited a number of times. But beyond that, what are some of the things that interest you? You talked about campaign finance reform.
Yeah, campaign finance reform is a big issue for me. I don't believe it's just a campaign tactic, which Congressman Upton referred to it as last week. It's more than that. We need to make sure that political contributions that are made to our political leaders are transparent. We need to make sure that whoever our representative is in Congress or in the U.S. Senate or even in the State House, that we know who's supporting them financially. There are things going on in this country that if they were happening in another country, we might point to that and say that's corruption. We need to make sure that transparent political contributions are evident, that we can see where people are getting their support. And we need to make sure that people's voices, individuals' voices, low-dollar contributors, even non-contributors' voices, are heard in our political process. And those voices, the working families, the individuals in this district and across the country that don't have great wealth, are losing out consistently in policy debates because their voices aren't the ones being heard in the hallways in Congress. The corporate lobbyists, the corporate interests are getting way too much influence. And I believe that campaign finance reform is not just a part of the solution for health care, but for education, for labor, for our environment, and making sure that environmental policies are advanced. So I believe campaign finance is something that is an issue of our day.
What does that look like? Because if you go back to the mid-'70s, there was campaign finance. And that said that every contributor that gives money to your campaign or anybody else's campaign has to be logged in. They can't be a corporation. They have to do all that. I assume that's not the campaign financing you're talking about, but rather the soft money that can be used or the outside political action committee money or that kind of thing.
No, I do believe that all political contributions should be documented, should be transparent. Right now, the only spot where that doesn't happen is if someone's given less than $200. But you're right, the soft money, the kind of dark money as well, where people can put money into super PACs and that money never be disclosed to the electorate, is the kind of dark money that I'm railing against. I think that if we give individuals a greater voice in the political process, it might look like the kinds of experiments that have happened in New York and Seattle, where individuals are given the ability to have their contributions, often small dollar, $10, $20 contributions, matched in a way that gives their voice 3, 4, 5, 7 times as much power. For me, it's not about taking all dollars out of campaign finance. It's about making sure that the balance is better so that real people's voices are heard and they aren't drowned out by thousands and thousands of dollars of dark money contributions by corporate PACs and individuals that are looking for shareholder value instead of personal health and quality of life.
As summer more or less starts to wind down, you may start focusing more on the election that's coming up in November. I hope you do, and I hope you'll join us every Sunday morning at 10 o'clock when we talk about it right here, To the Point.